Hello and thanks for clicking on this channel. Today I want to share the recap of one of the most exciting Korean thriller movies that came out in 2010. The name of this movie is I Saw the Devil. In the first scene, we see a man driving on a road and he sees a car pulled over by the side of the road and slows down to see what happened. In the car, there is a woman talking on her phone waiting for help. The man comes up to her and asks if he could help her, and he goes to fix the tire. The woman is still talking to her husband, who is the police chief, and he is on a mission. The chief asks his wife to stay in the car and locks the doors. He also apologizes that he couldn't be there and help her, and even worse, she is now stuck in the snow. When she hangs up the phone, the man approaches the window to talk to her, and she says that she prefers to stay in the car and wants to wait for help. The camera goes behind the man's car and it reads school bus. It's really dark and snowy and impossible to see anything. The woman turns on the light and all of a sudden the man attacks and breaks the window with the pipe, and he hits the woman in the head and knocks her out. The woman is tied up to a chair, naked and wrapped up in plastic. The man has every single tool to kill the woman prepared. She is dizzy and begs him to spare her life because she is pregnant and her husband even does not know it. In the next scene, the man is chopping the woman's body up limb by limb, and when he is washing the blood, he notices her ring. The next day, some kids find the body parts and call the police. The police search the area to find the killer and they find a head, and they now know that it's her, the wife of the police chief. In the funeral, he is devastated and promises to find the killer and revenge his wife. He takes 2 weeks off and starts to look for the killer. Before he leaves, he asks a few favors from his friends to have access to the records and files and looks for the suspects with similar crimes. He finds 4 men who were convicted but could clear their name and get out and start by number 1. He finds the first one and knocks him out. He takes him to an unknown location and shows the photos of his wife's chopped up body. Although he knows that this man did not do it, but he keeps on torturing him because he was guilty of many other crimes, and at the end, he kicks the man in the balls with a hammer. The next day, the convict goes to hospital, and he also talks to the police and confesses to his crimes, but doesn't say who did this to him. The chief goes to pay those other 2 criminals a visit, but they didn't do it as well, so it remains only 1. In the following scene, we see the murderer finds another victim on a road, and this one is a young girl who wants to go somewhere. At first, she refuses to get in, but it's really cold and dark, so she gets in. After a while, he pulls over and hits the girl in the head several times and takes her to his place. Back at his place, the girl is begging for her life, and the killer uses a machine like guillotine to cut her head. After he kills the girl, he starts to play guitar, and it turns out that our killer is also into music and art. The next day, the chief of the police, in his search of finding the killer, tracks down his mother and pretends to be an insurance employee and tries to talk to her. We realize that the killer left his house many years ago and he left his family, and now no one wants him anywhere. But when he talks to his little brother, he can get his new address. He goes into the house and opens the closet and sees a lot of women's clothes and makes sure that it's him. He searches the house and finds a secret door, and it leads to a room where the killer does his job. He also finds his wife's ring as well. He leaves the house but puts a tracker in the killer's car. At night, the killer comes back to his house with his new victim, who is a schoolgirl, and rapes her. The chief gets in and asks the killer, "Are you alone?" Then he attacks him, but the killer realizes that this opponent is different from the others. The chief puts a plastic bag on the killer's head and hits him in the head with a rock, and he gets unconscious. He's about to kill him, but he thinks that he should suffer more, so he feeds him a tracker. He waits for the killer to gain his conscience again, but when he does, the chief breaks both of his hands and puts him in a pit. The next day, the killer goes to get some medicine, and there he threatens the secretary and rapes her. But the chief shows up and hits him in the head with the chair and knocks him out. Then with the help of the secretary, bandages his wounds but breaks his feet and hands again. He cuts the killer's Achilles with a knife and sets him free. When the killer wakes up, knowing that he is being watched and followed, he starts searching his car, and when he doesn't find anything, he throws his phone away. But of course the tracker is inside him. He goes to see his friend and spend the night at his house, and when they are eating dinner, he realizes that what they are eating is not animal flesh. Now that he has a friend, he tells him his story and wants to get back at the chief. The chief follows the tracker this night as well. At night, when the chief arrives at his destination, he sees that the killer has a friend now, and together they kidnap girls, rape them and use their flesh as food. While the killer is at his friend's house with his wife, the friend is about to catch a girl and the chief arrives and they start to fight. The chief defeats him and ties him up with a chain and then pierces the screwdriver through his hand against the table. The killer comes in with a gun and the chief runs away, but he enters the building through the second floor window. In that floor, the wife of the friend is there and the chief knocks her out too. The killer is coming up the floors slowly, but the chief left some nails on his way. And when he steps on them, the chief beats him again and gets him knocked out. The next day, the police gets informed anonymously of this killer and his wife and they get arrested. But the main killer, well, our main character, still has some unfinished business with him. And this is the most interesting part of this story. When the chief talks with one of his colleagues, he realizes that the main killer can take out the tracker if he craps it out. When the killer wakes up in the sewer, he now knows that the tracker was inside him all along, and he talks to chief knowing that he can hear him. Then he goes to a pharmacy and buys a lot of laxative and tells the chief that he made a mistake and he should have killed him when he had the chance. And now he knows who he is. He passes the tracker out and leaves. The chief follows the tracker and ends up in the pharmacy and sees that the killer murdered the doctor and left. The killer then bumps into a cop on his way and kills him and takes his car. The chief, who lost his lead, goes to talk to the killer's friend in the hospital to get info, and his friend tells him that this killer is so messed up and did not just kill the wife. He always wants to feel the pain before killing his victims, so he definitely raped her and many other things. The chief, who knows that this guy is as messed up as his friend, kills him in the most brutal way by separating his jaws. A few moments later, the chief gets a call and the colleague tells him that the killer contacted them and he wants to surrender, but he has one unfinished business. He also gave his location. When the chief sees the location, he finds out that the killer is going after his family. He calls his father immediately, but his father does not pick up, and at the same time, the killer knocks on his dad's door. The chief, who knows that the things got out of his hand, calls some cops and tells them his story and sends them to his dad's house. In the next scene, we see the killer who killed the chief's dad, and he is looking at the family photo to find other members of the family. The father is not dead yet. When he starts talking to the killer starts to stab the dad in the eye. At that moment, the daughter of the family arrives and the killer gets her as well. In the next scene, the chief enters the father's house. The cops are everywhere around the house. He sees his dad on the floor with blood all over the place and a missing eye, and unbelievably still alive. But his sister is gone. The chief's phone rings and it's the killer. He says that he shouldn't have messed with them and gives the location of his sister. The chief lost all he had in less than 10 days. The killer surrenders and gives his location in a public place for the cops to catch him. But before they arrest him, the chief kidnaps him. In the last scene, we see the killer laughing at the chief's house, tied up, and tells him that he won. And the chief says that he underestimated him. The chief puts off a cigarette with the killer's face and pierces a screwdriver into his face. The killer first begs for his life, and when he sees that he won't be able to get out, he tells the chief, "You're nothing, you lost." The chief puts the killer's head under his guillotine and ropes it to the main door, and as soon as the door opens, he gets beheaded. And plus, he passes the rope through the killer's mouth as well, and if he talks, the same thing happens. The chief leaves, and at the same time a car arrives. Inside the car we see that the chief invited the killer's family, his son that he left, his mother who hoped to see his son again, and his father. They knock on the door and the son yells, "Dad." The killer is desperate because if he says something, he dies, so he can't tell them not to open the door either. He tries to yell with his mouth closed, but his family does not understand, so they open the door, and in a split second, his head rolls over their feet. Then we see the chief crying his eyes out in his car. And yeah, that's it. To be honest, this was one of the sickest and best movies I've ever seen in recent months. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more recaps, and leave a comment for the next one. As always, thanks. Bye.